Ever wanted a truly jungly, long-leafed plant for your house? Stick around with me and have I got a review for you. Hi there, my name is Memo, this is my channel, Houseplantygoodness, and essentially it's a place where I like to geek out about my big passion. You might be able to see some of it behind me and in front of me, it's tropical houseplants. So today I think that the cat's out of the bag on what we're going to be looking at today, and some people might know what this is, people that have been here for a while and have seen a couple of my older unboxings from last year might recognize this plant. Please do ignore how burnt some of these leaves are. I've kind of been growing this a bit feral. So yes, but for the people that do not know, this plant is my Philodendron Esmeralda Spirit. So this is a hybrid between the Philodendron Esmeraldense, which you should be able to see behind me, and the spiritus sancti. And you'll understand why I'm laughing in just a second. But yes, without further ado, let's dive into it. So background on this plant, and I'm not going to keep holding it up because it is exceptionally heavy. I have only just repotted it and giving it a massive new pot, and also a big moss pole, because this is a plant, and I'll get to this, that does appreciate a moss pole. But before we go any further, like head test wise, I mean, the leaf is huge. And I think that might be the last leaf. No, this is the most recent leaf, and it is very large. Again, do apologize for the sheer level of burning, but this was actually against glass, and it was fine throughout the summer last year. So the petioles are quite large, so that is something to remember, but again, I'll get to that. But background on this, let's dive into background, how this plant came into my awareness and how I ended up getting this plant. So, over a year ago now, if I'm not mistaken, the title of the video will have how long. It's definitely been over a year. I don't know if it was coming up to close to 2 years. Time is just a concept for me at this point. I do not remember what day it is, let alone what year we're in. But yeah, this was a plant that at some point Equigenera had some of the tissue cultured spiritus sancti, which are now much more readily available for everybody, but I managed to grab one of those. Whilst I was there, I saw that they had this hybrid Esmeralda Spirit. And I think they might have called it something else since then. They might have given it a more commercial name. But this plant is a hybrid between the esmeraldense, as I said, and the spiritus sancti. So I'm just like, ooh, interesting, because I love me some Philodendron Esmeraldense. I didn't know much about the spiritus sancti at that point, so I'm just like, you know what, let's try that as well. And I am quite glad that I did, and I'll touch on that on my kind of scoring with this. But overall, that was it really. Like, that's how it came into my awareness, and I was sitting there thinking, you know what, I know that I can handle an esmeraldense. I know how it grows, I know its kooky idiosyncrasies, I also know how hardy this has been, at least in my experience. I do not know, at that point, I didn't know anything about the spiritus sancti. Let's go for this, because there's more of a chance that at least if I've cared for one of the two parents, and I love the topic of hybridization, and I did a great video with an arid hybridizer, and I'll link it at the top. That video did not get anywhere near as much love as I thought it was going to, and it's such a shame, because Jos is such, or Jos, get the name right, Jos is such a knowledgeable person and such a lovely human being as well. I will link it at the top. I think it's probably because people might have missed it, but very interesting. If you want to geek out, I will put the video so you can go and have a look at it. But yes, hybrids, as he's mentioned in his video, have got the benefit of something called hybrid vigor, where it generally will mean if you've got parent A and parent B, when you mix those two together, they generally, the progeny, the offspring of a hybrid in this case, tends to be a bit stronger, more robust, have some benefits because it will take potentially the best out of both parents. So yes, that's a bit more about background. Let's dive into the next topic. And into the topic of speed of growth on this one. Right, let's have a look, because I think, other than maybe a couple of leaves, I've pretty much got all the leaves that it came with, including a lot of the newer ones. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So you're looking at about a leaf a month, basically. So again, benchmarking like I normally do with these videos. If I've got a golden pothos in my space, during the growing season, that might grow 2 to 3 new leaves each month on a growing stem. How does this compare? So in total, maybe I've lost like a couple of the leaves that it came with, but I'm pretty much added at least 8 or 9 of my own leaves in this space. And that was still whilst it was acclimating as well. I might have lost 1 or 2 here and there. But overall, I would say in the growing season, so spring and summer, this is a plant that will probably get about a leaf to 2, depending on how warm it gets and if the conditions are just perfect for it, a month. So on the faster side of philodendrons. Now, what does that mean for the winter? In my experience, at least so far, and I've not had that many winters with this plant, it does slow down a bit. You will maybe get a new leaf every 2 to 3 months. So it's slower in the winter, which is understandable. But by and large, not a slow philodendron by any stretch of the imagination. And then let's look at ease of propagation. Ease of propagation, again, I will hold my hand up high and say that I have not tried to propagate it yet. However, I have propagated enough plants that I should be able to give you more of a kind of educated guess on how well this propagates. Firstly, I know that the Philodendron Esmeraldense propagates like a dream. I would imagine the same with this. I've not tried it yet with the spiritus sancti, and I'm pointing there and I will show you my spiritus sancti in just a second when we can all laugh together. But the internodal spaces are a bit on the tight side, but definitely one that you can get something to chop it in. It's a philodendron. It's related to the Esmeraldense. This is going to be an easy one to propagate. If it's anything like the Philodendron Esmeraldense, then it should be relatively fast in the way that it will root out and start growing. Will it revert back to slightly smaller, more juvenile leaves? Yes, but it will bounce back quite quickly. But key point, moss pole. Make sure that you're giving this a bit of a moss pole from as young of an age as you can possibly give it. So if you're growing something like the Esmeralda Spirit or any other plant that prefers to climb, what you want to do is get it attached to a moss pole as early as possible. That will give you the best chance of it kind of hitting the ground running and going big fast. So if you kind of leave it for a bit, because I used to do the same thing, I leave it for a bit and it'll be fine and I'll just kind of let it grow a tiny bit and then I'll add the moss pole. Firstly, you're going to end up wasting the bottom layers of the moss pole, like you might be able to see here, where it hasn't rooted in because I waited too long. Granted, I've also moved moss poles, so that is the reason for this one. But if I hadn't and I was waiting until it was here, this entire bit of the moss pole here is just not being used up. And yes, you'll get some roots going in inside of that moss pole, but yeah, get it on super early and then it can start attaching. Monsteras love this. The sooner you can get them to start attaching, the better. And it will start sizing up faster as well because it can see that it's got that support. Also, you're adding in roots really, really fast into something like a moss pole. So if something does go wrong in the soil level, you've got backup roots in the moss pole. For these specific kind of D-shaped, kind of clear moss poles, they're not anything new. A lot of people are using them. I've got my own little unique way of doing it, but I don't think I came up with it. I think probably other people have done exactly the same thing. And I will link a video that I did because people wanted to know how I do it. I'll link it on this video. But yes, should be super easy to propagate. If you've ever propagated something, specifically the Esmeralda Spirit, because I know not everybody had got it, do let us all know down below. I'd be really curious to see what the kind of reality is. Based on what I'm seeing, I can make a very educated guess at this point on how this would propagate. Now, coming into availability with this one, and I'm pretty sure when I paid for this plant, and I'll see if I've got a video of when I first got it and kind of add it somewhere here, or even an image. This was, if I'm not mistaken, in the triple digits. So it was in the triple digits. If I can find the video of when I unboxed this as well, I will link it at the top there. But this isn't a plant that I've checked recently. I would imagine it's no longer triple digits. It might be on the slightly high double digits, mid to high double digits. I don't think this became as popular as maybe they expected it to be. And I'm wondering whether that is because the spiritus sancti has lost some of that novelty, so that urge for everybody to go and buy it. And also the people that did buy it, I'm wondering if they maybe struggled with it, they saw that it's a bit on the slow side, and it's kind of put them off getting anything that might be a hybrid with it. I am here to say that even if it is true, and based on my experience I would assume it is, that the spiritus sancti, at least when it's quite young and juvenile, can take a while to get going. It's not the fastest philodendron. Again, my experience, yours mileage might vary, yours might be a different experience. If so, do let us all know. And people might be wondering and saying, oh, you know what, I'm not going to get this because it's going to take a long time. I would say, again, based on my experience with both parents of this plant, having grown, granted I've always had a more mature specimen of esmeraldense, this is closer to the speed of growth of the esmeraldense, slightly tampered down by the spiritus sancti, but it's not super, super slow. So if you're worried and that's why you're not getting it, maybe consider that it's not as slow as you think it might be. But yeah, the price hasn't dropped. It's dropped, but it hasn't dropped to stupid low prices. Is this available all the time? Possibly. I don't see it come up very often in anything else other than maybe Equigenera, and I don't know if it's a hybrid that only they have done and if it's protected, because I don't know if you knew this. You could create cultivars, and I don't know if it's, I don't think it's patterns, and again, I think we talked about this with Jos, but there is something when you get commercial growers which can kind of say, no, nobody can replicate this, which is a bit dumb at times, but that's a different story altogether. They're running a business, I get it. But yeah, this is one that is interesting because you don't see it crop up very, very, very often. I did see a bit of this come up. I think Grow Tropicals had this in the UK around the same time, or maybe a few months after the Equigenera team had it. I don't know if they were kind of purchasing some stock from Equigenera and selling it on their website. I don't know. But I don't see it come up so often, and I am so disappointed. So disappointed by this. And I will show you my spiritus sancti so we can all laugh together. This pathetic excuse for a plant, and I'll see if I can hide myself behind there so you might be able to focus. Pathetic, pathetic, pathetic. I've even given it a moss pole, just on the off chance that that's what is going to help it survive. I mean, it's got a new leaf, so slow, and it hasn't really sized up. So between the two, between the Esmeralda Spirit and this Esmeralda Spirit, every single time. But let's look at pests for this one. And the biggest pest that I've ever seen on this, and I'm trying to see if there's any damage that isn't just sun damage, which no, I think it's all sun damage. I don't think there's anything else. I will touch wood and say I have never had thrips on this. I have never had spider mites, I don't think. No, don't think I've ever had spider mites. And the esmeraldense can get some spider mites sometimes, usually within the groove and usually around this time of the year. But this one has not had any spider mites for me. What this does have on occasion is both whitefly and mealybugs. Do either one of those two things get out of control really, really quickly? No. So there is that to bear in mind. So overall, I wouldn't say it's pest resistant. And again, I'm trying to think about both parents. No, the spiritus sancti hasn't been a pest magnet. It's just been super slow and so underwhelming. And I know everybody wanted it because they could say that I got spiritus sancti and it was really difficult to get the spiritus sancti and it was a holy grail on like rare plus indexes and all these things. I get it. But it was one of those plants that I'm just like, unless you're getting it in a mature specimen, and please try not to get it in a mature specimen, because if it does grow that slowly and you're not buying it from a reputable breeder, you might be getting it from people poaching. So, but yeah, for me, my experience, that was slow. This is better. This is better. And you get the benefit of something like a hybrid, is that this isn't taken out of nature. Somebody physically needed to, you don't know what the parents came from, that's a different story altogether, but somebody actually had to hybridize this plant. So they used to have both the mother and the parent, the mother and the father, to kind of like hybridize it in order to do this. So it's definitely not taken out of nature, at least the progeny. Cannot speak about parentage. But this plant, at least when it comes to pests, let me bring it back to the actual topic that I was talking about, not been too bad. Not been too bad. Nothing kind of gets out of control. So in that respect, super easy. But let's talk accessories and care. And obviously, the elephant in the room is the moss pole with this one. There's no way around this, at least in my experience. I pretty much gave this a moss pole from day one. I gave it a bad moss pole in the sense that I gave it one of my own ones, and it was tiny, 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 and there wasn't that much space for the roots, and it meant that I couldn't stack it up, so I had to, it was a whole thing that happened yesterday when I had to repot this plant, and I had to take the roots out of the moss pole and shove them back into this moss pole, and then finagle the bits that go into the pain in the bum. Put it onto a moss pole that you can eventually stack, because when it eventually will grow and start growing upwards fast, you want to be able to supplement something to it, which is why, like this moss pole, the growing point is through the leaves, is about here where my hand is, and it's got all of this moss pole to still go. Good. I'm giving myself at least a year's worth of breathing space of this climbing up higher. But yeah, and the other thing, obviously, I talked about this earlier, look at these petioles. This might be because of the location that I had it, because the petioles were a bit shorter before, but, right, and this is something that we can talk about in terms of parentage here. So the leaves are very similar, so they've got that ruffling that's happening from the esmeraldense, they've got the ease of the esmeraldense, but the shape of them, the longness, and it starts getting that kind of wave that happens at the top of the spiritus sancti. Now, the esmeraldense can have some quite large petioles, but nothing, at least from what I'm seeing, in relation to what you can get on the spiritus sancti. The petioles on this plant are very much, I think, more related to the spiritus sancti. I'm kind of looking at how this is growing. Yeah, so it's more related to the spiritus sancti. So this will go out and down. So this is a plant that I struggle a bit in this space. I will always find space for it because and again, spoiler, we're coming up to the score. This will give you a bit of an idea. I love this plant enough that I will give it that space. But you need to bear this in mind for both the spiritus sancti and the Esmeralda Spirit. This is ones that can get quite large. A lot of people ask me, how do I not have the same problem with my esmeraldense? There's a whole bunch of plant ties that are like making sure that the petioles don't like smack me in the face every 5 seconds. So they are attached to the thing, doesn't cause this any problems. The way that this grows, the way that the spiritus sancti grows, you can do that, and eventually will do that, but you start losing some of that beauty of this plant, which is that etherealness of those kind of wide open kind of petiole areas and that kind of dropping of the leaves. So you'd kind of want to keep it the way that it's meant to be, if that makes sense, at least in my experience. In terms of light conditions with this for me gets the same light condition as most other things in this conservatory. It's always been relatively high, so it's getting relatively bright light. And I mean, this is almost like it was on the window, so this was almost getting bright light, which is why it's got so much damage on these leaves. But can you see that it didn't kill it? It was absolutely fine. I do not think this is a plant that you can get away with medium light for it. So, and even low, absolutely no chance for low light. But yeah, bright indirect light, and I know everybody hates when people say that, is going to be your jam with this as well. Potentially if you get some direct light for maybe an hour or two a day in the summer, depending on where you are, might not be as much of an issue, but just watch it. In terms of fertilizing, I fertilize this the same way that I do everything else in my space. So weekly, a week solution of fertilizer, weekly, every week or every time I will water this, even in the winter. This is a very vigorous rooter, very, very vigorous rooter. So it does appreciate that. Now the humidity is what it is in my space, which is quite high, between 70–80% around this time of the year in here. Does this plant, do I think it needs it? Probably not. It's very, very similar to the esmeraldense in that respect, so I would say this would be okay with slightly lower humidity levels. 50 to 60 should be okay. If you're starting to talk about 30, that's probably going a bit too low. So there's that to bear in mind. I've got it in an arrowed kind of tower. It's got some holes on the side of the pot, and it's in Soil Ninja's Anthurium soil mix, so exceptionally airy and chunky soil mix, which suits this absolutely fine. Now let's come into the scoring with this one. So I'll start like I usually do, knowing what I know now. If I didn't have this plant, would I get this plant? Any guesses? Probably no shock to anybody based on my excitement throughout this video. Yes, 100% yes. 100% yes, I would get this plant again. I would almost go as far as say if I do need to do one of these videos. People have asked me for this, like which, like 10 or 20 plants would I save from a burning building if everything else is going to perish in my collection? This would be one of them. So I've really enjoyed growing this. So I would say definitely repurchase this. This has been a breeze to grow. It's not been particularly difficult. It's not been demanding. It just does its thing. And as I said, this is almost a feral plant in my space. And I know I didn't mention this in my feral plant video. And again, if you haven't watched that, I will link it somewhere at the top of the video because a lot of people asked me about that one. And yes, before anybody asked, I saw all the comments. There will be a part 2, don't worry. But yeah, I definitely would get this again if I didn't have it. Now, score from 0 or 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. Where would I place this? For me, it's a 9 or a 10. I enjoyed it so much. And even though you can see that I've kind of let it go a bit, it's fine. 9 or a 10. For everybody else, because of that sprawlingness, because of the way that it needs to grow, because of these big petioles, other than that, if you're okay growing most other Philodendron monstera arrowed type things that climb, yes, I'm going to take some points away for the fact that it does need a moss pole. I would probably give this a 7 or an 8. But overall, I think its ease, its kind of resistance, and I hate using that word, to pests, and the fact that it just keeps on going on, and it can be quite a striking and unusual looking plant, even if you need to deal with a moss pole here and there, and even if you need to give it a bit more space. Do I think it's worth it? Yes. Is it going to be for everybody? Probably not. But yes, these have been my thoughts on the Philodendron Esmeralda Spirit. What do you think? Because I know this was a fan favorite when I was kind of doing the unboxing and people were enamored with this. It's interesting because in that video I thought everybody was going to get really excited about the spiritus sancti and not necessarily the hybrid, but I was floored by how many people were just like, oh, the Esmeralda Spirit looks so cool. Over a year later, yes, it is very cool, and I have super enjoyed growing it. Super enjoyed growing it. And yeah, hopefully it will keep growing as well as it has. I'm trying to see if I didn't mess it up with the moss pole. Let's see, because some of the roots, some of the aerial roots that were in the other moss pole, because it was so thin, were drying out, and I don't think most of them made it, but there was a lot of aerial thick roots that were out that I shoved into this new moss pole with the soil. So I am hoping that will give it a bit more vigor as well. And just to give you an idea, that entire section here is the new leaf in its cataphyll that it's going to be emerging quite soon. The good thing with me having to repot this is I've moved it into a location that isn't going to be directly attached to windows, and I can kind of appreciate it a bit more. It's no longer behind me because it was getting too big. It's now to the side of me because that shelf is a bit lower and it gives it that extra bit of space to grow. But yes, do let me know your thoughts. Do also let me know if you've owned this plant. Did you get this back then? Have you got it recently? What have your thoughts been on this? Is this something that you were never even aware of? Is this something you might consider getting? Let me know. Let's have that conversation down below. But I will let you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully you have a great rest of your day. Hopefully I shall see you here soon, and I truly, truly hope that you have... I said it again. Too many times I said it again. But yes, I do hope that you have a good rest of your day, and speak to you soon. Thanks. Bye.